Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Welcome back once again to the Corner of Truth and Courage. You're listening to Fortress of Faith. This is Tom Wallace. Today we're going to be talking about Bonhoeffer. The new movie is out about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, produced by Angel Studios. The title of the movie is Pastor, Spy, Assassin. I think it's some great lessons for us today on the subject of courage. And we need to know some history to understand and appreciate the courage of this man. And I hope and pray that it will encourage us to make stands like him when the day comes that's needed. See, Germany had fallen into great tyranny after electing in 1933 Hitler to the government. A year later, he seized power that was not given to him legally, and he came out and killed all his opponents, accused them of crimes, and killed, they say 85, but it's more likely he killed about 700 of his political opponents there. And within a few years later, his doctrines and control had grown so much that his real desires to annihilate the Jews came out in 1938, the night of broken glass, and taking the properties there and putting the yellow sashes on them and rounding them up for extermination. His concentration camps. By the way, the yellow star, he got that idea from the Muslims during the time of the growth of Islam. They used to put the yellow sash around Jews to identify them for ridicule and humiliation. That's what the star was about. Got that from the Muslims. There was a man who had courage, a well-known preacher in Germany at that time, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He'd written a lot of books, was quite popular and quite vocal against what was going on in his nation with Hitler. And he was famous for saying this in his resistance and encouraging others to take a stand. He said, those who incite the silence in the face of evil is itself evil. To remain silent when evil's going on in your community. You're silent about it and don't say anything about it. That's evil. Just be silent. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is act. Sadly, only more people had courage in the earlier days, or Hitler had taken powers that were not rightfully given to him. More people spoken out who wouldn't have had the destruction that we had, but many cowered. And many had a backbone of a banana peel and speak out. He learned the lessons. Edmund Burke warned us back in the 1700s from England. He said, all that's necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Be quiet. Don't say anything. Don't speak up. And evil will prevail. All that's necessary is for us to remain silent. Do nothing. Thomas Jefferson so wisely said, I'm so glad for our founders of our nation. He said this, when the people fear the government, you have tyranny. When the government fear the people, you'll have liberty. Thankful for the laws that we have here, but if we don't speak up, they will take it away from us. Really, they will. Now, during this time, Germany had a struggle of what was going on, and they were trying to Nazify the church. The problem is that when Hitler came into government in 1933, 95% of the country was Christian. 2/3 of them were Protestant, namely Lutheran. And Hitler wanted to change the church because there's some big problems that he had with the church. So he had to Nazify it, and the people remained silent. They didn't speak out against the changes that were going on. Brought in a liberal bishop, Ludwig Müller, to bring this Nazification. The big problem they had is that Jesus was a Jew. You can't have Jesus as your hero as a Jew, not in Nazi Germany. So they had to reinvent Jesus. They had to create an Aryan Jesus, and this they did. For long, the Bible was thrown out and replaced with Mein Kampf, the doctrines of Hitler, rather than the doctrines of God. Again, a few people who didn't take kindly to that and spoke out. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. It's to say, I condone these things. If I'm silent, I am saying I'm going along with it. One of his friends, his best friend, Martin Niemöller, at first went with the Nazi crowd, actually opposed Bonhoeffer and tried to encourage him to stop speaking out against Hitler. Thought it was dangerous. As eventually, he had enough himself and left and joined and made what was called the Pastors Emergency League, which eventually formed into the Confessing Church. Those who are trying to remain faithful to a Bible Jesus rather than a Hitler Jesus, an Aryan Jesus. Well, Dietrich Bonhoeffer not only was outspoken against it, but he joined the underground movement, became an agent, a spy for the British and what was going on in Germany. Eventually, the Nazi Germans banned him from public speaking. He went deeper into the underground and was part of a group that was conspiring to assassinate Hitler. This warred within his own conscience. How can I, as a preacher, involved in killing some of the evil? But when a man takes guilt upon himself, in responsibility imputes his guilt to himself and no one else, he answers for it. For other men, he is justified by dire necessity. Before himself, he is acquitted by his own conscience. For God, he hopes only for grace. He struggled with that. Eventually, he was arrested on the 5th of April, 1942, was thrown into the Tegel prison. Sadly, he was executed on the 9th of April, 1945. Made this even more sad is that the camp was just liberated days later by the Americans. And his death, Bonhoeffer's death, was only 21 days before the end of the war, or Hitler committed suicide as a coward. I think it's interesting, this quote from Martin Niemöller. At the beginning, he didn't speak out. He was a coward. He said this. He said, first they came for the Jews, but because I was not a Jew, I said nothing. Then they came for the socialists, but because I was not a socialist, I said nothing. They came for the Catholics. I said nothing because I was not a Catholic. When they come for me, perhaps there'll be no one to speak for me. He realized that silence eventually will bring about your own destruction. The Bible says this in Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 through 9, open thy mouth for the dumb, and the cause of all such are appointed unto destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. God to be people of courage. When evil and wrong comes into our community and people are unjustly set for destruction, open your mouth. Don't be silent. See abuse of the poor and the needy. Don't remain silent. In the face of tyranny, we look at times like that with Bonhoeffer. We admire their courage. Maybe we would fancy of ourselves that we too would be like him. We would have courage and a brave heart to speak against the wrong that was going on, even if it meant the taking of our own life. We would have that courage. Oh, would we? Would we be faithful to what's right? We as parents, we tell our kids to have courage, to stand against the peer pressure of others who are trying to encourage us to do things that we know that are not right. We want our kids to have courage, and whenever our kids to have the courage to stand alone. Do you? Or have you? I think there's plenty of examples of pressure going on for us in our world as adults. What's happened to the church of late? Been a lot of compromises. A lot of things going on. We speak out against it, or did we follow the crowd? I'm going to bring up something that my father-in-law told me many years ago. Back when he was a deacon of a church, they were going to vote on something that was a bit controversial. He knew entering that meeting how he should vote. But he heard one by one of all the other deacons saying, I think this is okay if we do that. I don't know what the situation was. I don't really know all the details. But when it came time for him to voice an objection, he didn't. He went along with everyone else because everyone else was going that way. You could see that. And that struck his conscience. He was provoked in his conscience for going the way with the others. How many times have we done that? How many times have we let influences that's going on? It's like pulling that thread out of that sweater, that loose piece of thread just annoys us. We start pulling on it, and before you know, links start falling apart. If we keep pulling on that thing, before too long, we're going to lose our own sweater. That's what's going on with the compromises in our churches, in our ways. We've allowed these things. Remember, not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. People have courage. Stand up and say, no, folks, that's wrong. We need to change these ways. Allowing music into our church that we shouldn't. We're not dressing appropriately for the house of God. We're allowing things in our home that we shouldn't allow. We need to be the parent, or the husband, the pastor. Wrong is coming into these places, to our church, into our home, into our community. We need to have the courage to say what's right, to side with God. That's what we're trying to encourage you to do here at Fortress of Faith. So we invite you to join us every day at the corner of truth and courage. Thank you for being here, but don't just be a hearer. Don't just be a listener, be a doer. So go out now and be salt and light. May God go with you. Have you ever thought of what a $10 donation could do to help your community? $10 donation could sponsor one meal at a homeless shelter, could buy a bag of pet food or treats for an animal shelter, or could help a small business by buying a handmade craft item. Or a $10 donation could help your community find guidance rooted in biblical principles by supporting Fortress of Faith. Here at Fortress of Faith, where we meet at the corner of truth and courage, we tackle tough topics, answer the most challenging questions, and equip communities with tools to navigate modern life faithfully and confidently. Help your fellow man and support Fortress of Faith today with a $10 tax-deductible monthly gift by calling 800-616-0082. Again, that's 800-616-0082.